All right, let's kick this off. Thank you all for coming. Good evening. Welcome to our special evening networking reception. This is unusual for the Canadian Club, and as a new board member, it makes me particularly excited to be hosting on behalf of LinkedIn. So as you can tell, I'm on the board at the Canadian Club. I also do online learning, and I do some government data stuff on behalf of LinkedIn. And I'm excited to be your host this evening. I don't host a lot. I talk a lot, but I don't host a lot. So excuse me if I'm sort of learning as I go. I'd also like to welcome our webcast viewers. I think this is the first time we've ever had a webcast. Like, we do Blue Jeans and, webinars, but this is the most complex setup I've ever seen in this room. In fact, anybody who walked by over the past few hours was very impressed. So welcome. Thanks for joining us. And I also want to start by acknowledging the land that we're meeting on. And for centuries, as you've probably heard before, this territory has been the traditional home of the Indigenous peoples of the Mississauga of the New Credit Nation. We're grateful for the opportunity to gather on this land. And the evening is all about connections. And I hope that both through our work at the Canadian Club and our work at LinkedIn, we're able to include the traditional inhabitants of this land and their traditions in our networks, in our community. Our club, so the Canadian Club, is proud of the wide range of events that we're able to offer each season. And they're not just a reflection of the culturally rich country that we live in. The diversity of this crowd, I think, is indicative of that. But they also attract a diversity of speakers and topics. And so this evening is meant to be on the periphery of that as we expand into new areas. It's a good example of the diversity, again, of the Canadian Club's subject matter. So we've got a long track record. I mean, we're talking 100-year track record of providing a forum for guest speakers to share their points of view with us. And before this evening gets underway, I figure I should talk a bit about the upcoming events that you all might not be aware of. So this Friday, on the 17th, we've got the Honourable Reza Moridi, Ontario's Minister of Research, Innovation and Science. He's going to address the need to promote wider scientific literacy. It's actually a topic that we've been working on a fair bit at LinkedIn, and I think that many of the others in this audience have, so I'm excited for that topic. We're also hosting a distinguished panel of pension experts, and that's coming up on Wednesday the 22nd. They're going to be addressing the evolution of Canadian pensions, and again, the diversity of speakers there in terms of their backgrounds is remarkable. To order tickets or to learn more, visit our website. It's canadianclub.org. Don't go to canadianclub.com. That goes to the thing that everybody else thinks of when they hear Canadian Club. And you can join the conversation via Twitter and Instagram by following us at CDNClubTO or by using the same hashtag, CDNClubTO. Also, I know everybody had to sign an NDA when they were coming in. I'm a lawyer by training. We were taught, at least off the record, to ignore NDAs. So at least for the purposes of the time while you're in this room, feel free to take photos, tweet, communicate with the rest of the world. And now let's get on to sort of the core subject matter of this evening and of LinkedIn's work, which is networking and the power of making connections. So there's some credence to that adage, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And in some ways I should know. People joked for many years that I was jaked in. I'm like a hyperactive networker, and I proved them right by finding my home here at LinkedIn. Certainly it's true that knowledge is power, and using our knowledge to make meaningful connections and networks is even more powerful. So the idea behind this event is, how do we take what you all know, the places that you work, what you all do, and make it more powerful by connecting with others and empowering you to do so in the future. Tonight, 4 of my colleagues and fellow board members will tell you about how they've used the power of networking to leverage networks and make connections. We want you to weigh in as well, so bring up questions as you're going, and we also want this to be interactive. The point of having the time before and after this event is that you all will also meet each other. So we're going to invite questions later on. There's going to be a mic passed around. And now for our panel. So we've got second from my left, your right, is Gillian Riley. She's our president. This is why we're really excited.
She's our president, everybody.
Thank you, David. So Gillian joined Scotiabank 23 years ago. She took on increasingly senior roles, and her current position is EVP, Executive Vice President of Canadian Commercial Banking. And she's, of course, relied on her networks for advice and counsel throughout. David, who was so excited a minute ago.
There you go. Thank you. Verity's in my network, in case anything. Yeah.
So David recently moved from McKesson Canada to McKesson International. He's now acting as Vice President of Enterprise Strategy there. During his career at McKesson, he led the transformation of the company's public policy, comms, and corporate marketing departments into one integrated public affairs function. And that took, as you can imagine, a lot of relationship building and connections to achieve. Next is Pam. Pam Warren is a VP of the Canadian Club. So she's also a partner at Egon Zehnder, and she's responsible for recruitment at multiple levels. She recruits CEOs, she recruits executives, and she's worked in business development and marketing across North America and Europe, also with Bristol Myers Squibb in the past. Her success relies on her networks throughout Canada and the US to reach talent at these levels, and we're excited to have her here at LinkedIn today. Again, to her right, she's chatting with him right now, Canada Club President-elect Andrew Graham. Andrew is the co-founder of CEO of Borrowell, a financial tech company that helps people make great decisions about their credit, and the first company in Canada to offer free and accessible credit scores. It's always fun being able to read other people's company taglines, because like you sort of picture yourself in their role, but I'm literally like, that's what you say, right?
I say it.
In 2017, Borrowell was recently named by Lendit as one of 6 companies globally that has demonstrated the greatest potential to impact the future of consumer lending. They're launching, so he launched a very successful, I would argue, one of Canada's most successful ever startups, and that takes a lot of connections, so I'm excited to hear from Andrew about how he made those as well. And finally, our facilitator today, you already heard his laugh at least once, and I look forward to it more frequently, is my colleague Perry Monaco. He's on the far side. He manages customer success here at LinkedIn. He leads a team that's committed to LinkedIn's users and customers achieving success, as the name would suggest. Welcome, Perry. And with that, before I turn the panel over to speakers, I wanted to do a card draw. And so this is something we always do at Canadian Club events. And Gillian, our executive director, just suggested that.
Congratulations, Raphael Chanakuli from Mona Chappelle.
Thank you. Sorry, so that was Colleen Kennedy, our executive director, who did the pull.
And they win a bottle of wine.
And yes, they get a bottle of red from Foreign Affairs.
All right up in front.
Thank you.
Well done.
Good call. All right, and with that, I'm going to turn the Canadian Club podium over to this panel. I'm excited for the conversation. Perry, over to you.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Oh, come on, guys. We clearly need a little bit more libation. Good evening, everyone. Thanks a lot, Jake. I appreciate the opportunity to do this. I know that based on the questions that I have here, we're going to get some really good discussion going. But again, similar to what Jake mentioned at the beginning, we really want to hear from you as well. So there's going to be a number of questions that I have. But certainly, if you have questions, we'll leave Q&A from the audience towards the end. But get ready for me to call on you, and we'll do that easily just by raising your hand, and I'll pick you out of the audience. One of the things that I think is really interesting when I look at one of the questions on here is it's about career pathing. And funny story, I will never forget this because it was very impactful. It happened right around where that speaker is. I was sitting at a table here at LinkedIn at an event, and this new guy was sitting across from me, or beside me, I can't remember. And I said to him, hey, welcome. When did you join LinkedIn? And he said, today is my first day. And I was like, oh, okay, cool, welcome. What do you do now? And in layman's terms, he was a salesperson. Oh, cool, that's awesome. Where did you come from? Oh, I was a lawyer before I came here. And I was like, what? You were a lawyer and now you're a salesperson? That doesn't seem like a simple A to B sort of career move. And that person was Jake. And I will never forget that interaction because it's a career progression that I've never heard and experienced. So there has to be a hidden story in there somewhere as to how someone goes from being trained as a lawyer, going through school, getting that job, and then coming over here to LinkedIn. Not that there's anything wrong with what it is he does now. He does really good work, but it certainly isn't the sort of logical career path that we think of. So my question to the panel with that very long setup, but I thought I was reminded of it as I'm hearing Jake talk about his, or up there talking, is I'd love to hear from a couple of you as to what your career path was like. Was it something that was meticulously planned, or was there a number of zigs and zags that went into that particular path to get you to where you are today? So maybe we'll start with, partially because I know a little bit of a story, but maybe we'll start with David.
Hey, Perry, how are you?
Good, how are you, David?
Good. Perry and I are both Western grads, so for all the Western grads in the room, thank you. There's a lot of us, there you go.
I'm also a Western grad.
Hey, Gillian! It's going to be a good night, everybody. Career pathing. So I'm from a Jamaican immigrant family. My mother couldn't be here tonight, so my cousin is actually here being shy in the back. She didn't want me to point her out, but she's here.
And now she's horrified.
With her. And so the expectation for us as immigrant children is that you become a professional. There's just no choice. You're a doctor, you're a lawyer, or you're a failure, really. Jake mentioned that I recently moved to San Francisco to take on a really awesome job. My mom still has my law school admissions letter from McGill in a shoebox and says, are you ever going to go to law school? So I think, for me, candidly, I dropped out. I enrolled in McGill. I paid the tuition. I took a summer job. I was working in sort of politics. I took a summer job before law school at Navigator, which many of you guys know, and I went to see the chairman and I said, I'm going to McGill in the fall, and he said, go to law school, but if you feel like in 4 years or 5 years after your article you're going to come back here and ask for a job, then don't waste your time. Figure out what you love and what motivates you and what you want to get out of bed every morning and do, and run after that. And if I would have been able to tell you that 10 years later I would have integrated a communications and public policy function at a Fortune 5 company and then moved halfway across the world, I mean, it's kind of crazy. I think, I was able to do it because I love what I do. I'm confident when I give advice to people, and when I speak, they're on the board with me, and they know that sometimes I speak too much. But it's a good thing. So that was a hard choice to make, and it was, for me, my career path probably seems a bit more defined. I stayed in the same function. Well, now I'm in strategy, so it's a very different function. But it was about knowing what drives you and being able to take that risk. And if you've ever had a Jamaican mother, you know that saying no is a huge risk. So I encourage all of you to do it.
Thanks. I haven't, but I hope to have one soon.
I can lend you mine. Isn't that right, Simone?
Pam, could you maybe tell us some of the people that you met along the way that helped you get to where you are today? I'm assuming, again, that there were some zigs and zags, but how were the people that helped you along the way?
So I would say when I think about how are the people, we can't help but go back to our parents. And I think the most amazing thing my parents gave me, which I hope I'm giving my children, is this belief you can do anything. The catch, of course, is my father was a scientist. So I got all the way through undergrad and was looking for a job when I realized the words investment banking existed. So there's, depending on the people you meet and who's in your life, you will be cast in certain pathways. And I think, what does that make me think about as a parent and as a search professional is how do I give my kids the exposure of all of those things that could be options for them at the right time, so that you can start to kind of choose those things that are really speaking to your heart, I suppose. So I would say I was blessed to have people that just believed in me. And I was blessed to have that kind of you can do anything thing, so that you approach the options with that bravado that you need sometimes to just put yourself out there. And today you can't. We spend so much time because it's such a social world and everything is exposed that I think we have the tendency to double check and triple check, and it's not the same kind of level of just throwing yourself out there that maybe we did in the past. So, not totally answering your question, but it was that blind belief and maybe just kind of going for what your heart told you should try to do.
Maybe a quick follow-up. Were those people that you always that were close to you, or were there people that maybe surprised you with the belief that they had in you?
I think about one kind of fundamental experience, which was getting an internship in my MBA. And it was an internship with Mars, so I knew I wanted to do CPG, and this was a company that gave me an internship. And the guy who recruited me was actually recruiting me into the procurement function to analyze their future buys on advertising. And it just seemed like a very odd thing, and he kind of pulled me aside and he said, listen, this is a chance for you to just spend, I said, I'd rather be the brand person. He said, just take this opportunity to kind of walk across the organization and learn and get exposure to different functions. And I would say that whole kind of supply chain procurement realm and how it connected into buying functions was something I would never have thought about. So I do think sometimes when you're in the interview process and someone says, what about? I think just pause and reflect and think whether this actually meets your scorecard of what's interesting to you. Could be surprised.
Thank you. One of the things that I've been asked numerous times as a LinkedIn employee is, what is the right amount of connections to have? Who should I connect with? What are the rules around connections? And so connections are something obviously that play a big part of what happens on the platform, but certainly it's really just an extension of real life. And so connections are really important in real life as well. So I'm wondering what, other than perhaps the person that is most special to you in your life, your partner or whomever you want to think of, hopefully they're not here so they don't hear what your answer is because you're not going to answer. But who, I'm just kidding. What's the best connection you've ever made? Maybe we'll start here. What's the best connection, or who is the best connection that you've ever made and why?
Of course, you have to ask me this question.
That's right.
So I think it's hard to sort of put that onto one person. I think about types of people. So I'm going to broaden the question to types of people that I've interacted with in my life. And I think the people I've gotten the most from are the ones that challenge me and actually push me to do things that I wouldn't want to do or wouldn't normally think about doing, and force me out of the comfort zone to say, you know what, you can do that. Why don't you go and do that? And I think, I don't really want to. And they push you there. And then they support you as you're going through it. So whether that's in the work environment or that's someone in your, I've always had lots of friends. Like, I think that you need outlets outside of the work environment. So people who can give you very objective advice as well and say, you know what, that makes a lot of sense. You should go and do that, and support you as it's going. So it could be in the workplace or it could be personal, but having people who challenge you, push you out of the comfort zone, and then support you as things maybe aren't working out perfectly.
Gotcha.
And they also give you feedback. That's the other big thing. And I wish I'd gotten that a lot earlier in my career. But getting proper feedback, like good feedback, what's one thing I could do better? As opposed to, don't you like my new outfit? Well, what are they going to say? Of course they like the new outfit. So getting proper feedback, I think, from people, and people who will really give that to you, is really important to make yourself a better leader, a better person.
I used to work with someone who told me feedback is a gift over and over and over
it's
again.
True.
And then I gave them feedback, and
It wasn't a gift anymore.
they didn't like the feedback. And I said, wait a minute, I thought you said feedback was a gift. And they said, yes, but only if it's good. True story. And I said, well, then what's the point of the feedback then? So that's a really good point, is that you have to have someone who's going to give you feedback that is constructive, that you can grow and learn from, right?
And what someone once told me is, you might not like the feedback, and you might not like it in the moment, and don't react to it, and don't be defensive right away about it. Go away and think about it if you're not sure. At least give it a thought. Say thank you, and then noodle it.
How about you? What's the best connection that you've ever made, and why? Or who? I liked your answer of grouping a whole bunch of people, but is there a particular individual, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I think putting aside family, which you said,
they're only watching.
an important caveat. I mean, look, I set out to found Borwell, and for the first few months, I was kind of doing it on my own. And then I had a conversation with an old friend of mine, Eva Wong, who was just finishing mat leave. And we had founded a nonprofit together and worked together on a number of things. And we always just really got along well and worked together well. And she said, look, do you mind if I come and sit down with you and let's try to figure this out? And we ended up co-founding the company together. She's become a very prominent voice in the tech community in Toronto. She speaks a ton about issues of sort of diversity and women's leadership in tech. And for me, it's really one of the great professional relationships in my life. She's someone I've learned a ton from, who's got a very complementary skill set to me in many ways, but we have very similar values. And so I feel very fortunate that I'm at a place, at a stage in life where I can choose to work with someone like her and people like her that I think are great. So I feel like I've had one or two really great professional relationships like that in life, and I feel very fortunate to have them. So,
Awesome, thank you, Pam. One of the things that I think people struggle with is how to generate some of those introductions that are helpful for us to be able to expand our networks. Hopefully a lot of networking will happen here tonight, but invariably there are going to be people that are part of our larger networks that we know someone knows, like there's people in David's network that I want to get in touch with. Do you have any tips or suggestions for us to be able to approach someone to be able to tap into their extended network in a way that doesn't seem to be overly invasive or perhaps too salesy?
Right. So you might imagine as a search professional, I get asked this a lot, right? Could you just introduce me to blah, blah, blah. And I think, my advice to you is in general, people really want to be helpful. They really want to be helpful. But if you kind of approach them and say, I'm thinking about a career change or I'm interested in getting in banking, what do you think? I would encourage you to think about being really specific. Here's how I think you can help me. I'm interested in this aspect of banking and you've spent 10 years there. Is there one or two people you think I might be able to chat with that could help me think this through? Because I think sometimes if we just put it out there, it's a bit of an overwhelming request and suddenly the person feels a little bit burdened with trying to help you with your networks. But if I think you just say, is there one or two people that you think could really help me make my connections further in this particular area, it's really doable. And I think in general, people want to be helpful. So the more specific you could be, the better.
Can I jump in with like something very tactile? Because I feel very strongly about this, or at least I've got very strong views about, I think, how this can work well. I get asked often to make introductions to people, and exactly like Pam said, I'm happy to do it most of the time. I'm a big believer in this sort of like double opt-in introduction. So I will never, introduce someone cold. I will never say, hey, Pam, Verity asked to meet you. You're now connected by email. What I would do is, first of all, I would ask the person to send me an email that's only about Pam that I can then send to Pam. So let's say we have a meeting and Verity says, I want to meet these 3 people in your network. I would say send me 3 different emails, each one saying why you want to meet Pam, why you want to meet Gillian, why you want to meet David, so that I can literally just forward each email to the right person. And it's like self-contained. I can add a line at the front saying, hey, met this person, she's great, if I want. And then it's like really self-contained, really easy and very clear. So I'm a big believer in like an email that I can forward on, and then it's like make it double opt-in. And I found that that's the best way to do things. So that's certainly how I operate.
Can I violently disagree with Andrew?
Yeah, even better, yes.
I love it.
So I come from a family of preachers, and they do say all these things. And there's an old Methodist saying that you should do all the good you can to all the people that you can. And I would say the greatest thing you can do to yourself is stop networking. Every time I get an email that, like Andrew's described, I'm serious. Andrew describes, I'm like, okay, here I go. I'm going to meet this person, and they're going to ask me for something. Whenever I meet someone doing good for something that I care about or I'm interested in, I'm like, yes, Verity, this is something that I'm willing to lean in. And then Verity could ask me for anything. Money, friends, my mom. I'm going to be like, yes, you did try that. And I ran with you as far as I could. So I think if you can find a way, I'm kidding, I'm not disagreeing with Andrew, but I'm thinking a lot of us are obsessed with this connection culture and Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn, where we have these sort of shallow relationships that will only take us so far. I found that the most helpful relationships I have are relationships that I've made either through volunteer work, through institutions where there's a common bond like Western, where there's things that we've done together where I can say, hey, you now know who I am at some level. I want to ask Pam, can you introduce me to Gillian? I'd love to learn more about what it means to be in banking, so that it's not as cold. That's served me well, and I just offer that up as something to think about. Now, don't do good so that you can get a connection, because then you'll look like an ass. But if you can build relationships, it's an easier way to network.
You open up an interesting point of conversation that we want to talk about as well, and that's the role of social media in all of this. We talk about connections and getting those introductions. In theory, it should be easier than it ever has been before. But there's also a lot of noise out there, right? There's a lot of different networks. There's a lot of etiquette that we may or may not understand based on the network that we're on or not on, or who it is that we're trying to connect with. So does anyone have an opinion on the role of social or smartphones or the availability of technology and how that's impacted networking in either a positive or negative way? Yeah.
Just from the search firm perspective, when LinkedIn became such a powerhouse, the reaction amongst the search community was, oh my gosh, this is going to disintermediate search. And the reality is, I think we're actually much more powerful together. So I know I have a few of my peeps in the audience, and we rely heavily on LinkedIn as a tool, one of our tools in our resource kit to meet, outreach, see new people, because it's a tool of a certain generation. It's funny, I just was speaking to a CEO today who said, can you just open that and paste it to me, because I don't have a LinkedIn account. And I said, go get a LinkedIn account. So I think, first of all, I would say those go in sync with one another. I would say, secondly, whatever you've done in your life, good or bad, is going to be evident to any employer. And so, in preparing some documentation for a CEO search I'm on, we do media runs. We attach all the articles and all the press, negative press and positive press that we find on people to the document. So, people know a lot about you before you actually ever get in the room. So when I have a 16-year-old daughter who posts pretty liberally on Instagram, I'm like, just think about that, right? So I think it's part of it. On my cell phone, I carry my global database. So I have access to my database. So if I'm in my car and I want to talk to Bob Smith in Germany, who's CEO of this company, I have that. So the other thing it's done is speed up the connection and the availability of information quite dramatically.
I think actually, Pam, you raised a really good point about things you don't want to do on social media, right? This whole idea that things that I did 20 years ago, people can still find or they can see it, and they're not on Facebook or wherever. We're not always conscious of what's being seen there, and everybody can find everything out about you. I met with somebody yesterday. I went to a meeting with somebody, and I Googled their name before the meeting, and I found this article on them, and I found out they had 2 children, and one of their children had the same name as my child. It's an unusual name. And I just quickly did that on looking at social media. And so you can research things and you can use it for a whole bunch of things. But if you're trying to build yourself and your presence and your profile, make sure what's on social media about you is like, I Google my name and I see what's there and I go, wow, how did that get there? There's a Gillian Riley writing a book about being thin and not being fat. There is. Right? So you just want to be careful about what you post and how you do it, because it's about you and it's your brand.
I used to do media work. You can't correct the record if the source is you. Think about that as you put things online. Content is king. If you curate a story, and when we would do panels and stuff, if it was from your Instagram account, that's a source. We can use it. Whereas if Jake told me over coffee, I need to double check and validate and get 3 sources. So just keep that in mind as you move forward.
Any advice, Andrew?
Look, I think tools like LinkedIn have made things vastly easier, and I use it a lot. Sometimes people ask me, you're connected to so and so on LinkedIn, and maybe one of the only challenges that we find is I might have met someone 2 years ago at a conference, and that's not as fresh of a connection. I find that between LinkedIn and email, that's how I do most of my connecting and work. I'll leave it there. I think we've had some great comments from the other panelists.
Good. One of the things that I've done different conferences and delivered keynotes on, creating a social media strategy. And I'll start the conversation with how many people in the audience believe that they have a social media strategy. And the answer to that question is really what you said. If you don't think you have a social media strategy, you're wrong. The strategy that you have is what appears in the Google result. If you don't know what's there, you don't own the strategy, and that's the problem, right? Owning the strategy is something that you want to do. Creating the strategy is something that's likely already been done for you. And so that brings up another point. When we talk about connecting, when we talk about this opportunity that we have to be able to connect with other people in and out of our industry, is what do they know about us, what do they think about us, and this magical word that has been created that now applies to human beings and not just products and services, and that's the concept of a personal brand. For some of us, that's very cliche, and for some of us, it's very scary because we imagine brands in the traditional sense if this isn't your thing. So I'm looking to any of the panelists up here for advice on building your personal brand, or what do you think are important elements of a personal brand as you engage in some of the networking opportunities that hopefully come along your way in your career.
And maybe I can start because I
Sure,
feel very
yeah.
passionately about this topic, actually. I think it's really important that everyone does have a personal brand, but I think it needs to be authentic, right? Like I'm not going to pretend to be something I'm not. You have to play up your strengths, and it has to be legitimate, and it has to be something that possibly and probably does differentiate you from everybody else. What is it that you bring that's going to make you either more employable or a better leader or whatever it is to the table that differentiates you? So figure out what those strengths are and be able to articulate them very quickly within 30 seconds. And then check out that that brand is resonating with other people. I work with somebody in HR actually who has said for years, and he has always said this, have a personal brand, it's what's going to differentiate you. And for years I kept thinking to myself, what does that mean? How do you do that? And it dawned on me, you have to figure out what differentiates you and then make sure other people understand that that's who you are.
Pam, I know you have an opinion on this.
Yeah, so first of all, I would say reflect. Like, Gillian, you're saying it in different ways, but, really reflect on who you are, because it drives us crazy in search firms when everybody just comes on, I can be that person.
I'm
Wow.
results-oriented.
Yeah, so really be honest with yourself. And I think, by the way, it's a journey, right? People go through a journey of learning about their strengths, their gaps, their quirks, their personality traits. But so do that reflection. Think about what you might write on that sticky note is really true, and then go around and test it with people that love and respect you, and that will give you honest feedback to say, this is how I feel like I'm showing up. Is that what you're seeing? Because the truth is, if you're not really self-aware about that, others will get to that ahead of you. We do very deep referencing and recruiting people, and we test that brand. And so if it's not well known to others, it will become quite apparent. So I do think, I'd step away a little bit from personal brand and just who are you, and really knowing what that is and being able to summarize it very crisply for other people so that they can get to know you in that same way. And by the way, to Gillian's point, like understanding the good, the bad, the quirks, the angles makes you interesting. So that's important.
And David touched on this point earlier. Like I don't. It's not to say that personal branding or related topics aren't important. So they are. So I agree with that. But I think what's even more important is actually going out and doing stuff and being successful. Mm-hmm. So if I care about having positioning myself in the market as being sort of like a thought leader in technology or financial services, for example. I absolutely should spend time writing some blog posts, writing some content, giving speeches. But more important than all of that is building a successful company. Mm-hmm. So if the company that I'm leading fails, it doesn't really matter if I write a blog post the next day, right? It's actually more, if I have to choose, I'd much rather build something successful and be successful, and then building the brand and communicating comes on top of it, right? It's like the old joke of the politician who's got a bunch of scandals and hasn't had any successes saying, why isn't my communications team doing a better job? Mm-hmm. It's look, you start by doing good things and not, getting in trouble, and then communications is a layer on top of that.
Content is king. I just want to, Perry, I hate to make everyone talk, but it's important. as you build your personal brand, the first thing you got to do is do a good job, right? If you can't do the job you have, then applying for another one makes no sense. And if you look like you can't do the job you have, you're not going to be credible in the next one. Once you're in the room, though, my challenge to all of you, and the greatest gift I ever got from 2 different leaders I've worked for, is the permission to bring my whole self to work. And I think as we work in a different society, we look different, we sound different, we love differently, have the courage to bring that full self to the table. And if you can't at that employer in that environment, then they're not good enough for you. And I say that as, a young leader who's black, who's different, who loves differently. You've got to, I work for, a 61-year-old guy from, America, who is pretty rough and tumble, and they all wear Brooks Brothers khakis and Brooks Brothers suits and gold buttons. And I was going to my first big meeting, and my president said, "You might want to change your outfit." And I was like, "Why?" And they were like, "Well," and I was like, "No." And I showed up with my pocket square, and I was wearing loafers with no socks. I had little sockettes on. And the CEO made a joke about my sockettes, and to this day, it's like, "Hey, David, are you wearing your sockettes?" And it's like, I was like, "Yeah, and are you wearing your ugly tie from Brooks Brothers?" Don't put that on the internet. But it was like, it was a nice opportunity for us to bridge that gap, and I just think it's tremendously important that you do that. And it's hard, and it's uncomfortable, but if we don't push and change the face of leadership in North America, no one else is going to do it.
Okay.
All great points. Just to double click on what Pam said, because I think it's really important to be self-aware enough to know that your brand, the brand that you want to have, is not necessarily the brand that other people see. A prime example happened here tonight, right? I would never describe myself as a guy that has a crazy, weird laugh. Yet that is exactly how Jake introduced me to you, or you to me, right? So clearly I need to work on my branding with Jake. I think which it basically means we need to stop working beside each other because I'm very disruptive, apparently. But it is a really critical question to ask yourself. What do other people think about me from a branding perspective? And so great exercise to take a lot of this advice here and then test it on the people that are around you. So let's go into the audience and see what questions you have for our esteemed panelists around connections and networking. What kind of questions do we have? Don't be shy. Right at the back there. We'll wait for the microphone so the friends on the internet, the entire World Wide Web, will be able to hear our questions.
Great. I'm going to stand here so I don't get any feedback. But I heard the comments about providing email introductions and whatnot, and I get those all the time, and don't get me wrong, I've asked people to provide those as well. But in terms of value, the grand scheme of things, it's kind of low. It's easy to do, it's quick, but in terms of does it actually make a connection, it's certainly not as good as a face-to-face connection. Face-to-face is always better. I think everybody would probably agree with that. So that said, a lot of the comments have sort of been social media-centric and email-centric. But if you comb that out, if the internet went away today, if I could, get your comments on that same subject, without the internet, how would you brand yourself? How would you best practices with respect to getting those connections? If I could maybe start at the right, if I can get your comment on that.
That would be me.
Yeah.
I don't think it's any different. I mean, my initial reaction to the question is, I still think you would do the same things. I mean, I think the internet and the social media is a tool, but if the tool wasn't there, you'd still connect with people by the phone or in a meeting, and you'd network with them, and you'd create a connection and a relationship and learn something, and you still have your brand. It would probably be more face to face on the phone. And that's probably how they did it before there were social media, right?
Do we remember?
We do, actually. But I think maybe we need to do more of that. Like what I think it's bringing up is the idea that face-to-face is still really important. We shouldn't only rely on the social media, that we should remember that the face-to-face creates actually a better connection with someone. And maybe that will be more effective.
I wouldn't mind just asking the question back to the audience. How many of you are in your current jobs because of a personal network that introduced you to that opportunity?
A lot.
There you go.
Wow.
So I
that's
think,
a face-to-face?
I think the personal connection is obviously super vital.
Yeah, I think just to quickly add to that before I go to another question, so get your hands up if you do have one. It really is an extension of what we should be doing in real life, social media. And so when you think about what you consciously thought about what to wear tonight, that's the question you ask yourself when you're creating a profile or your brand on LinkedIn. What do I want that first impression to be? That is really much what my profile looks like. Who's going to be there is important for you to make a decision as to whether or not you're here today. That is the same thing that would apply in a social situation when you decide who it is that you want to engage with or connect with or talk to. So I think you're absolutely right in the sense that it really is something that you should be doing in real life. It's a different way of doing it, and it's magnified because it is online. There's a whole bunch of people that you can engage with that you wouldn't otherwise be able to based on physical geography.
There's a bunch in the back, though.
Is there?
with the
Okay,
mic, yeah.
go in the back.
Is this, oh, it is on. Hello. Just further to what you're saying about social media, and I guess cautioning people against doing it inappropriately because you can always see what's, anywhere online. On the flip side of that, how would you feel if you saw a candidate applying for a job and they either didn't include their social media handles, so whether that be LinkedIn, well, I guess LinkedIn is a fairly good one to include, but whether that be Twitter or a personal website or something like that, versus if they didn't include it. Would you ever, I guess, hold it against someone if they weren't sharing that information freely on a job application?
That's a Pam question.
That's a Pam question. I would say, one of the first things I do if I get excited about somebody for a job is I type their name into the search engine and pop up everything that's there. So whether you put it on your resume or not, I'm looking to who are you? How do you present yourself? If you have a Twitter feed, is that like an angry Twitter feed over some particular thing? It tells a lot about you. So I use the CV as kind of an interesting piece of paper that helps me get to know you, but it's not everything.
You actually go through the Twitter feed, Pam?
I may or may not. It depends. But I get a quick snapshot of you, which will pop up very quickly with your LinkedIn, with your, Twitter and LinkedIn are the two that pop up most readily, or articles that include any news about you.
Absolutely.
I probably wouldn't look at a Twitter feed, to be honest.
Oh.
But I'd hire Pam.
Sorry, I completely agree. But obviously, some candidates, I would do the exact same. But some candidates, their social media accounts might be private, and I'm assuming you don't go and friend them just to look at their feeds. But I guess it's more, would a candidate be more appealing to you if they had a Twitter feed that they were sharing? So it would be something that was an extension of their professional self versus someone who didn't.
So again, it probably depends on the job, right? So if you are in public relations, communications, marketing, yada, 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 or if you are a chief diversity officer and you've written 10 pieces under it, there's a lot of reasons why your public profile could be interestingly augmented. But I think there's equally other roles that I wouldn't hold it against you.
One thing I would also add is that I would question you if you didn't look at my stuff in advance of meeting with me. And I know I work for the company that I would want you to look at, but I would wonder why you didn't want to do your research on me the same way that I would do my research on you.
That's a good point.
In a job-seeking mode.
Some questions up at the front.
Anyone?
There's a
right
bunch here.
We'll go to this woman here and then this man right here. Hold on a second. Got the microphone behind you there.
No worries. Thanks so much so far, guys. I want to get a little bit meta. So let's say you were an attendee at this event. What would be your networking strategy to sort of talk to people? What would you be looking to sort of get out of this session?
It depends what motivated you to come here, truthfully.
If you came here to meet people, you might want to have a target with how many people you're going to meet, how many business cards you're going to get, and how you're going to follow up. I'm not in LinkedIn, but how you're going to follow up with these people. What did he say? What?
So you're not in LinkedIn?
No, I am in LinkedIn. I said I don't work at LinkedIn. Good catch, huh? I am on LinkedIn, actually. I was saying that earlier. No, I am on LinkedIn. I meant to say, don't work at LinkedIn, but I know how to network with people. So if you're going to want to meet 10 people here, go and meet 10 people, get their business cards, and follow up with them tomorrow, either to have a coffee or a lunch, figure out something that connects you, and come with something interesting to say and do your homework.
Figure out something that connects you is the key. If you're just connecting for the sake of connecting, then it's going to be a lot harder to make that relationship work. My big thing is to create some sort of proximity around a community of interest, right? Whether it's, a lot of people will say, I don't want to be known as the, you know, the black person, the black executive, or the female executive. I'm like, hello, I'm a female, I'm black, who wants to connect? Like, you know, like, you want to, for me, it's an opportunity for me to say, there's a bridge. Let's talk about what that shared experience looks like. And by the way, I'm pretty talented, and we can talk about what that means and what that looks like.
That's pretty bold.
I identify as a male.
I might be scared.
This gentleman here in the front.
We need the mic for the webcast.
Great, thank you. My question is more a numbers question, I think, and specific to, I guess, the LinkedIn world, where we live in this world where, I guess, numbers are important. The more people you have, the more contacts you have, or seem like, you know, that's better. Is there a point of no return where, you know, you have your first you have 20 people who are your first contact, a second, third, where someone may have 40,000 contacts, but it doesn't mean anything at some point? Is there a point where really your contacts should only be around 200? And I know that's probably a bad question for LinkedIn, but you know, I'm just curious about the numbers.
Look, I have a reaction that I have no idea how many contacts I have. I really don't. I think it's a couple hundred, but I have no idea. I would say, are they meaningful? And is that something you have intrigue in continuing with? Now, let me pause and say, for a generation coming behind us, numbers actually do matter. I have a 16-year-old who's in modeling, and you know, it matters that she has thousands of followers or she doesn't get a job. And that is hard for me to process, but literally, you know, jobs are allocated based on followership for some jobs in those, you know, venues. Now, that's not LinkedIn, but, you know, as a blogger or as, you know, it matters about your followership. So, I think for the classic conversation, I think it matters about, are they meaningful to you?
Hi, I'm Jean. It's weird talking to you like this. And just to piggyback off what you just said about the next generation, I'm curious to hear how amiable you are to using an app that's called Shaper, which is based on the concept of Tinder, where you swipe left, right, but you create a profile with your interests, and anybody within the radius, you can swipe and meet up. Because a lot of the next generation are networking in that way. How comfortable are you with doing something like that? Just curious.
Andrew,
I mean,
your turn.
I think it's, go ahead.
Swiping right and swiping left is here to stay, regardless of what context it is. I mean, Netflix doesn't allow you to give 5 stars anymore. It's thumbs up, thumbs down, right? So it's the same type of thing. So I think swiping right and swiping left is here to stay. It's your level of comfortability in the context of which you're being asked to do that, I think, is what's going to be the individual choice.
Yeah, I mean, you know, first of all, I think it's cool to try new apps just as a general rule. So that sounds fun. I'd definitely try it. I think it depends a bit on like sort of like stage and what you're looking for. Like, you know, I'm looking for pretty targeted advice. Some days I'm probably less in the frame of mind of like just expanding my network for the sake of expanding it. But there are certainly been times in my life where I'm just like, hey, let's go meet a whole bunch of new, interesting people.
There's a question, I think.
At the back.
Did you get a response?
There's 2 back there.
Let's grab those. There's a woman right here in the middle.
I'll try it.
Blonde hair.
I don't think I would try it.
Hi, I'm Christina. I was wondering, either when people reach out to you on social media platforms or when you meet someone at an event like this, are there any things that you think are common that people are just doing wrong, or things that have kind of bugged you, or things that you see people doing over and over again that are not effective when it comes to networking?
Were you asking anyone specifically? Or no.
No, just whoever wants to pipe in.
David, you've been quiet.
I would go to Andrew and Pam's advice. Be specific when you reach out to me, because if you don't, then it gives me reason to click delete, because I'm like, I probably haven't met you. Whereas if you give me a reason, even if it's made up, I'll probably think, maybe I did meet you at that LinkedIn event. I should probably follow up with you.
Thank you.
I think for me, it would be being, to your point, being disingenuous. And that goes through a lot of the things that we talked about, whether it's in-person, digital or not, is being genuine in your communication, being genuine in what it is you're trying to get out of it, will go a long way.
I just think we're all busy people. So a connection is helpful. If you haven't had that connection, you kind of go, who was that person in the midst of all, So anyway.
So I think, sorry, Gillian, were you going to say something?
No, I think they're trying to wrap up.
Oh, sorry.
No, we have other
Oh, keep
questions.
singing.
We're good. We're good. We got one more
Trying to
question.
say
I mean, just to help with, as you sort this through, because it's been helpful to me, someone a few years ago told me to know the difference between a mentor and a sponsor. And I think
That's
as
a
you
big
network,
point.
it's really important you do that. We all have people who are willing to send an email on our behalf because they're our friend, right? So Verity may say to me, can you introduce me to Willa who's in the back? Yeah, sure, I can send that email, but I'm not sponsoring that connection. If you can find someone in a position like Gillian's or Pam's who have credibility in their space, who knows your work, knows your personality, and is willing to say, David, not only am I introducing you to this person, you ought to take a minute to talk to them for this reason, whole different ballgame. In your workplace, if you work in an organization like Scotiabank or Cisco, where there's large, or McKesson, large global organizations, and you get someone like Gillian to not forward your email to the person in investment banking and say, meet this individual who worked in the part of the bank, but say, I really think you should consider this person for the job, here's why, blows open the doors, and then that multiplies your network. So just, I would challenge you all to think about that to sort you through. I did that and sorted it through. The exercise is create your board of directors. Who would you ask to be on your board if you started a company?
Great idea.
And those 6 people that I put in that circle are all people who are willing to speak up and go the mile for me.
That's good advice.
Lots of great content out on the web there if you want to learn more about creating your own board of directors. We have time for one more question, I think.
Well, the guy back there had come earlier.
All right.
Maybe we'll get the last two.
We'll go way in the back. And then
Way in
He
the
has
front.
his bottle of wine.
Yeah, exactly. Raphael can offer up a bottle of wine for a question.
No, you don't have to.
So my question is sort of directed towards the LinkedIn people in the room who work for LinkedIn. I run a trade association, so I get requests almost every day. I accept everyone unless they're a quick look at the profile, and I reject maybe 1 out of every 100. So I've got a LinkedIn network of 1,400 people. I'm not bragging about that, but none of them ever contact me unless they want to sell me something. So I asked the question, why are people contacting me? Probably because they want to see who I'm connected with. So am I just a conduit for people who want to network with other people? Because I'm personally getting no value out of LinkedIn, unfortunately. No, I'm doing something wrong. So what advice would you give me to be more effective as a LinkedIn user?
Jake? No. I think it's been answered in the sense that it really is about who you're connected to that matters most. If this was a LinkedIn presentation, I'd be contractually obligated to tell you that there's 540 million members on LinkedIn, 14 million in Canada, and we grow at a rate of 2 new members per second for a total of 7,500 per hour. But this is not a LinkedIn event, so I'm not going to do that. But at the end of the day, that doesn't matter. Honestly, I talk to my customers all the time. I really don't care how many people are on LinkedIn. It really doesn't matter. What matters is that one person or that group of people, and we've said this before, that can help you accomplish your goal. So some people will tell you it's all about the numbers, right? Having a big network is really what matters. And then other people is, they're very discerning with the amount of people that they connect with. At the end of the day, there's no right or wrong answer. If there is something that you want to get out of a networking event or platform, the best way to do that is to communicate it clearly. I am here for this reason. This is, and that goes to David's point about being genuine and honest with the person, giving them a reason to want to connect with you. Tell them why you're there. What is it that you want to achieve? Why are you? Is it important to find, the next opportunity, to network, to find new investors, whatever the case may be? Or are you just there, hanging out at the bar and just watching what's going on? No wrong answer. It ultimately is about how clear you are about why you're there, and then maybe applying that to your connection strategy. It's really difficult to answer the question in terms of like, this is what you should specifically do, because there's so many different reasons to be networking, whether it be digitally or otherwise.
I thought maybe since it was called out, we're going to go with one more question. And before we go to Raf, I wanted to compliment what you were saying, because we have an amazingly sort of unified panel right now in terms of the recommendations and the responses. And they're basically three things, right? They're be genuine, and they're try to figure out what the purpose of your social interaction is, because if you walk into that social interaction with a purpose, that'll help both with the genuineness, but more importantly, with the other person actually helping you. And then finally, things like numbers, they change, they matter over time based on changing norms, but they really relate most to the first two parts of the question. What's the purpose of having this network, and are you genuine in having that purpose? I'll talk a little bit about how I came to this place after this last question. No, Raf, let's go to you. Come on, let's hear it.
No, if I can summarize everything you guys said into one word, I'll say opportunity. So you guys are showing us, that we should give opportunity to criticize, to forward an email, to give a feedback. And I'm sure that, after those amazing tips you guys shared, your emails on LinkedIn will be flooded with requests tomorrow of, people that wanted to connect and then whatever. And my question to you guys is that, like, why? Why you will take your time and do that for someone that you never met, that, it's cold calling you? Is that a good deed? Do you guys perhaps like open and look at the profile and said, this person needs an opportunity? Why? And why do you guys do that? Why do you pick one out of a lottery to do that? Is that a particular reason?
You said that there was one word summarizing what we've been saying as opportunity. I would summarize my answer in one word right back and say karma. I think there's a really awesome opportunity, I think, potentially down the road for me to be able to work with someone or engage with someone in a meaningful way that I don't necessarily envision yet. And so if you look credible, if you look professional, if there is some sort of opportunity I could envision down the road, I'll probably connect with you. But I'm also pretty liberal with the way in which I will connect. That's not necessarily what I'm suggesting everyone does, but that's what I do. So I look at it as, if I'm going to give a little bit, I'll probably get a little bit back. That's what I'm hoping for.
I was going to say the same. It's the give to get, and every meeting you have, you learn something new. But I think someone said it earlier, you have to make it worth someone's time. You got to get the draw to get them to want to read it and say, wow, this could be someone who would be really great to meet with. So there has to be a draw to figure out what that is. But then I'm certainly going to give the time to that.
That's great.
Mine's more personal, and I help everybody who's credible for helping. But I also know that I'm different, and I wouldn't be in the position I was in if someone didn't see me and say, I'm going to help you because I see a lot of myself in you when I was leaving university. So I make a point about looking for people who are not from traditional communities and saying, hey, you're credible and you've got the capacity, then maybe you should meet Gillian.
There you go. I am on LinkedIn.
Yeah, she is on LinkedIn, yeah.
Especially because LinkedIn made it easier to reject. Like, you guys, we have like the opportunity to click the button and have an answer ready for you. Like, no, I'm not interested. So, it's very motivating to understand your reasons, so we can do the same. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So with that, yeah, we got one more. All right, go for it.
Okay. First of all, I would definitely like to thank LinkedIn for having us here today. This is an amazing space, and it's an amazing panel. And Jake was really the mastermind of this event. So also a big thank you to Jake for putting this together, giving us the space. I think these are great events, and I think we should be doing more of these. So well done.
Thank you, Gillian. I appreciate it. Thank you all for coming. Really, this was meant to be a conversation. We're learning from you all. We're learning from how this event has gone, and I think the Canadian Club and you all will grow, hopefully, together moving forward. So we're here for another half hour afterwards. I want to thank, of course, my Canadian Club colleagues for participating in the panel, for preparing with us for it. And I think I speak for everyone here when I say that the advice that we heard was helpful, both based on your experiences and based on the practical ways we're going to carry it forward. I hope you've gained some insights and tips that's going to help with your own connections. And to put it into practice, as I said, we're going to spend about a half hour here. We've got drinks as well after the event, so I look forward to meeting as many of you as I possibly can in 30 minutes. And that'll add to my LinkedIn tally. Thanks for coming. Bye for now.
Sure.